currently working. By show of hands, who would like to work for a financial technology company or already working? The fact that we see more and more people interested to work in a financial technology company points to the systemic danger for banks. And in this presentation, I'd like to talk about systemic problems that banks face and what opportunities it presents to entrepreneurs. Before we delve into the presentation, I'd like to give a bit of background about Bluewire Capital, about myself. Bluewire Capital is a London-based venture capital firm we founded in 2015. We invest at early stage. We invest from 100K up to 2 million. We invest Europe only. Our focus verticals finance, delivery, workflow, and art. This is unfortunately probably it will be very difficult to see the icons, sort of the logos of our portfolio companies. This sort of portfolio founded early stage investments to date. We make 5 to 6 investments each year. We're going to be adding more companies to our portfolio as we speak. In terms of fintech, we involved with the Fintech Capital, which announced their launch about 2 weeks ago, and they work in P2P lending space. We team of 3. Myself, I have experience in M&A advisory, and I worked in the house corporate M&A, and I have an MBA from London Business School. So, in terms of the interest in fintech, these 2 conferences, which is Money 2020 and Lendit, they didn't exist 5 years ago. And as you see, number of attendees are surging, which points to significant increase in fintech. And the reason being, the banking sector is broken. And I'll talk about systemic problems with the banks. One of the big problems for the bank is that they're universal. They do everything from checking account to lending to payment to wealth management, and this creates a host of problems. One of them is a lack of transparency for a customer. According to UK competition market research, 4 banks in the UK, they made 8 billion in revenue last year from a personal current account, which is supposed to be free. And they make this revenue in form of hidden charges, in form of different overdraft fees. So I guess this sort of, this is very annoying problem for the customer. The second problem, it's a lack of innovation. Because banks are universal, scale is a mantra for them. It's a very concentrated market. So in UK, 4 banks hold 80% of market share. And I guess that sort of, by virtue, means that there is a little incentive for them to innovate. And if you look at innovation, so apart from ATM in 1960, or online banking in the 90s, there was little innovation happening. Most innovation happened on securitization, on CDOs, on credit default swaps, on derivatives, you name it. So finance, along with health and education, is one of the industries which is sort of left to be disrupted, and behind sectors like telecom, where, for example, Skype holds 40% market share in certain segments, which is disrupted, music, which is disrupted by likes of Spotify, and host of other sectors. So finance, with the health and education, they share same traits. They've been around for a very, very long time. And they were built on the legacy of domination and trust, and this is going away. So rise of technology disruptors that has come along over the last 5 years. These are a result of 5 key development changes that happening and which create this perfect storm and lay foundation for change. And I'll talk about these key developments. First key development is that loss of trust. Banking sector has always been about trust, and bank lost this trust. And in fact, trust is a huge barrier for entry for startups to come and enter the field. 2008 financial crisis, it's created seismic shift in dynamic of trust, and 20 largest banks, they paid over 20 billion fines. This sort of for due to misconduct and breaching various regulations, this points to the fact that banks are not trusted. The second dynamic is the expectation of better. So with the proliferation of all on-demand startups like Deliveroo, or maybe you name it, with the supercomputer in my pocket, I expect to order everything on demand. I expect to order food on demand. I expect to free up my time by ordering handyman. I expect to book accommodation. Everything is on demand. So, but at the same time, banking hasn't really changed in terms of the delivering these consumer expectations. In fact, Net Promoter Score, sorry for very sort of, it's quite hard to see where actually banks stack up against all the against all other industries, but you see that it has the lowest NPS among other sectors. So the third development is obviously the rise of millennials, and I guess one of the millennials. So millennials, who are they? They are age group who reach adulthood around 2000. Age group from 18 to 35. They at forefront of technologies. They understand what sort of changes happening in society. They're very tech savvy. The tech savvy is more than previous generation. And the millennials are big population. The net worth is poised to grow from 2 trillion to 9 trillion. In the space of 5 years. But at the same time, this customer segment are not targeted by the bank. In fact, 40% of the millennials, they would consider switching to bank without branches, with no branches. The fourth development is a more sort of rise of mobile technology and what opportunities it's opened up in terms of new distribution channels. So globally, there are 2 billion people using bank accounts. 75% of them are offline, so they're not using online accounts. And if you compare that with expectations, that in just a couple of years, there'll be 4 billion smartphones and 10 billion mobile connected devices. It just tells that there is a huge untapped market ready to be reached by mobile technology. So the last but not least is the regulation, and regulation is a trend for innovation in startup. We all tend to blame regulation, but regulation exists for very good reasons. Consumer rights has to be protected, and 2008 financial crisis revealed systemic failures, and including government regulation in form of Dodd-Frank, Volcker, Basel III. It all exists for very good reason. At the same time, regulation is a friend for innovation, and in some countries like UK, regulators seem quite open-minded and approachable, and responded very fast with the rise of technology disruptors. So UK, they launched 2015 governmental body called PRA. It's a Prudential Regulation Authority, which is former FSA. With the aim to actually encourage competition in banking. So they dropped some of the significant requirements for the banking sector, and you probably follow the news. There was 4 challenger banks that they raised collectively around 300 million, like Halfon Bank, like Tandem Bank, like Starling, like Mulder. So all these banks, they currently some of them already received the license with restrictions, and they're going to go fully launch, in a very, very short time frame. So we see that the regulator is very is embracing the change, and they're actually encouraging new startups to be created. Also, there was a new agency called New Payment System Regulator, which also was launched with the aim to broaden the access to payment system from non-banks. And I guess the latest funding for Bluewire and TransferWise in the remittance space, it's all just indicates that the those facts that they all go together. So regulator is actually laying very solid foundation for startups to be created, not only in lending but also in payment space. And recently, governments in their budget, they set up an initiative which is they call New Bank Startup Unit, which also will have the same sort of, as I already told, promoting the creation of new challenger banks. So, so all these five sort of key developments, they lay foundation for a change, and it created perfect playground for startups actually go and attack specific segments of the banking sector and unbundle the bank. So they attack specific segments, they deliver 10 times better experience, they're taking away all the hidden charges, and the banks, they suddenly sort of gradually waking up to this challenge, and they understand that they shouldn't worry about competitors of their size, they should worry about little guys who sort of eating their lunch now. So I guess in this slide I want to talk, sort of emphasize that technology, effect of technology on evolving the financial services sector. You cannot emphasize its effect, and I guess this is a bread and butter for MBA students. It's Clay Christensen disruptive innovation framework. Gist of it is that technology improves, performance of technology improves over time. When it starts out, the sort of bank or consumers, they disregard the technology because it's inferior. But as technology matures and has produced more use cases, the technology in the end become much more superior than humans. And as an example, Lending Club. Look at the default rates from 2008 to 2015. They started with a very high default rate. So the default rate for Lending Club was around 10–14%. And if you try to match that to the gross yield that the marketplace lending provided, it was a negative yield for the lenders. So I guess it was a very inferior proposition for investors. But over time, they build the algorithm, they leverage on the data, they build a model which actually much more robust. It's a machine learning. It's all algorithmically driven. And the default rates in 2013 it dropped to 3%. And now the net yield for the marketplace it provides for investors, including retail investors, much more competitive proposition than, for example, your saving accounts in a bank which pays 0%. So how banks are responding. Obviously, there are 4 ways to respond. One of them is our trade acquisition, and we actually last month there was acquisition by BBVA, which acquired Helsinki-based startup called Ollie. They do an online business banking. The other way, they also make investments in a startup to keep a tab on them. And unfortunately, the slide couldn't show you sort of the banks, but 3 banks are leading the way. It's a Citi, and it's a Goldman, and it's a JP Morgan. And they sort of, in all different verticals, payment, lending. Other ways to partner, and there was a case with the Citi who partnered with Lending Club. Additional way to respond is setting up all incubator, and Barclays did that, sort of co-opting the startups. And then sort of last resort for them is to compete, and Charles Schwab, they recently set up their own algo trading, which is sort of robo-advisor, which will compete with Wealthfront. So I'll finish off this presentation with the latest financing trends in the fintech space. The VC funding quadrupled since 2015. It quadrupled from 3 billion to 14 billion. What's interesting is that if you look, you cannot actually see this sort of slide, but if you look at the graph, so the number of deals actually increased only marginally. So number of deals in 2015, it was 590 and it increased 10%. But if you look at the sort of VC funding, it actually doubled. So this indicates interesting trend, sort of rise of mega rounds. So there is a significant now larger share of the later stage funding sort of rounds, more than 100 million, sort of, which is sort of driving all the funding trends. So in terms of so this financing trade encompass 8 sort of verticals, 8 segments in fintech, lending payments. Normally, traditional lending takes roughly half of all the VC funding in the fintech. Payments normally takes 25%, and then sort of the rest is spread across other segments like personal finance, asset management, remittance space. Europe is actually leading the remittance space, and I guess that mainly has to do with that we have sort of blend of different nationalities in Europe, a much more sort of heterogeneous the society than, for example, in the US. The other field, the capital markets, we actually have, I think, on the panelist, Whitcroft, with his fund, Illuminate Financial, who is doing just that, sort of doing B2B solutions for capital markets. Then insurance sector, which is sort of emerging trend. It's getting a lot of attention now from venture capitalists. It's a $4 trillion sector globally, and we'll see probably that insurance actually increase, sort of the share of the funding flowing in this segment will increase. So in terms of the sort of largest fintech deals globally, obviously the US leading the pack. 2015, there was a roughly 8 billion VC funding in the US, and half of that actually was attributed to mega rounds. So it's a sort of chart showing 26 largest fintech deals. Three of them are only coming from Europe, so we sort of lagging from behind US and Asia. So three was a funding circle, Apple Bank, it was a World Reynolds. In this slide, I want to sort of talk about 2 things. So one is the rise of mega rounds, and as I talked, that in 2015 was a significant amount of sort of funding, over 100 million announced. And US and Asia is actually, the share of the mega rounds is much more sort of significant compared to Europe. So in US, share of mega rounds is 50%. In Asia, it's a 75% of all mega rounds they attribute to the all VC funding have happened in that continent. Whereas Europe is much more moderate. So with the mega rounds for Europe was only 20% of all VC funding that went to Europe. What it's actually tell that in Q4 2015 there was a significant drop in VC funding, and everyone suddenly talking about like a bubble in fintech, a bubble in the market suddenly cooling off. But it actually, sort of the reason being is that Asia and US, they were heavily relying on these mega rounds, and whilst they stopped keeping up with the same trend that they set themselves in the Q3, we see significant drop-off in VC funding because of these sort of mega rounds stopped happening. And I guess there is now sort of backlog of companies actually ready to be IPO and get a liquidity. So if you look at the Europe actually, it drops slightly, relatively slightly, from 400 to 300 million in Q4. Sort of, we see that Europe has a much more healthy funding ecosystem. So we don't see that sort of bubble that actually we see across other sort of across the pond in US and in Asia. And also just one thing I forgot to mention is that the role of corporates in the VC funding in Asia is 40% of all the funding that went to VC-backed startup, they came from corporates. And I guess that has to do with that Asia has a lot of technology companies created like Alibaba, like Tencent, that driving this funding into these fintech startups. US is the second, the share of corporate funding into this in the fintech is 25%, and it's coming primarily from Google, from eBay. Europe is much, again, more modest. It's only 10% from corporate, and I guess that has to do with the fact that Europe hasn't yet created companies of the similar size as Alibaba's, Tencent, technology companies that will go and also disrupt that area. So this slide is, I guess everyone knows the term unicorn, which is sort of term for billion-dollar company, sort of startup which achieved that valuation. And I think Q3, I think it was a significant number of unicorns being created. Even someone was joking that every unicorn is created every 4 days. So there are roughly 150 unicorns across the world. 19 of them it's in the fintech area, and 14 of them in payments and lending. We have 4, which is actually from Europe, which is Klarna, which is Sweden-based. It's in the payment, sort of intersection of payment and lending. There is ADM, which is purely payment play in the Netherlands. We have Funding Circle Lending UK, TransferWise, Remittance UK. So in terms of the 10 largest sort of European fintech rounds that happened in 2015, mostly come from the UK, 6 from UK, 2 from Germany, 1 Izetto, which is payment, they come from Sweden, also Panellists, which is the marketplace lending in France. UK dominate the fintech funding. UK account for just shy of $1 billion of funding that went into VC-backed startups, out of 1.5 of generally across Europe. So it's 2/3 of VC money that goes to UK. London is the top city. It's half of all VC funding that went to London. It's 50 deals, 750 million. And then 2 other cities is Hamburg and Berlin. So Germany. So Germany is the second sort of most active country in terms of fintech funding, but they sort of significantly lagging UK with the 200 million funding. I guess that's it really. So I'll open up the floor for questions. It'll be interesting to sort of hear your questions and happy to respond to them.
I have a question actually. So where do you place financial data providers within the fintech category? Because some people say that they are fueling the fintech applications through APIs, for instance. So is that not on your landscape as well?
Data is a way of actually differentiating. So it could encompass all the verticals that I mentioned. It could be in lending, it could be in payments. So data is a way to actually be better than existing offerings. So you couldn't really sort of carve out certain vertical just only for big data. It's just a necessary sort of way actually to produce innovation in fintech.
Rex, as to happen, East Berlin is going to be the next center of funding for fintech.
Yeah, Berlin is actually it's a very interesting sort of city with the ecosystem is developing a lot there, and there are 2 factors. One of them is rocket internet with sort of the idea actually sort of cloning the business models and making them successful in different emerging markets. And the model was around hiring a lot of sort of people from McKinsey's, from like of McKinsey, from different sort of top tier investment banks, and they sort of created that talent pool, which is actually becoming sort of very vast in Germany. And a lot of them, having worked for Rocket for a certain period of time, they go and strike on their own. They create their own startups. And Germany is actually sort of, the fact that it's sort of lagging the UK by a considerable pace indicates that actually Germany will eventually sort of eliminate that gap and catch up. Berlin is an excellent sort of also very sort of international vibrant community. So I don't see any sort of impediment that Berlin wouldn't actually also be seen as a center for fintech innovation.
You mentioned the fall in fintech funding since 2013, and my understanding from your point is that you attribute it to the fall in mega deals. So is it safe to say that your view is that there is an above all and everything's fine? And valuations are reasonable?
It's a very easy to make a judgment that it's a bubble because of the fact that it's actually dropped and it's a steep. And it's easy to make that judgment if you're outside of the sector. If you're inside and if you try to do the bottom-up analysis and try to see sort of what sort of share this market, for example, lending club, the US lending club, and Prosper, they made 8 billion origination in loans. But if you take like US loan market, it's a huge, it's like 12 trillion market. So it's a 2/3 of US GDP. And they only like scratching the surface. So if we sort of believe that this sort of innovation, and it's a systemic, and it's something that there is no point of return, I guess it's not a bubble, it's on the beginning. There'll be certain corrections, and I guess there's always, especially with the venture capital, there's always time when people sort of high expectation, and when it's not sort of living up, then sort of there is again pessimism. But on the long run, we will see that fintech will only sort of develop, and there'll be sort of correction in the short term, but long run, it's a very healthy future.
Okay, so I see like there's like City Bank or Barclays, they have set up the incubation centers to help the fintech startups, right? And like, are they going to acquire them, or like how the fintech startup will play into the game, and how to change the bigger like how that help?
There are different sort of line of thinking around banks actually creating their own incubators. Some sort of VC venture capital, they don't really like corporates because they have a bit different agenda. That's why, and they act sometimes sort of VC may be against corporates because they think that corporates in the end, because of different sort of vested interests within the organization, it eventually will stifle the innovation. So there are different line of thinking around whether actually these incubators that set up by Barclays will eventually be successful models.